Hey there, my friends. My name is Wes Spencer, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Perch Security. I am a long-term cybersecurity practitioner. And if you're watching this video, chances are your managed IT provider has asked you to spend just a few minutes with me to take a look at why cyber threat detection is so important for you as a small or mid-sized business. See, if there's one fact we know, just looking at all the news headlines, the threats that we face today are much different than the threats we faced years ago. And that has caused us to have to adapt and have to change our strategies. In fact, it's important for us to think about why we need to invest in new and more enhanced cybersecurity changes than we may not have ever thought of before in the past. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about why cyber threat detection matters for you as a small or a mid-sized business. So if you look at this image right here, just take a minute and digest this. You see a lighthouse. It's kind of a dark, brooding, stormy day, so to speak. And it's really interesting to me because, I don't live around lighthouses, but to me, this looks like just a day I'd like to just sip a cup of coffee just like this and enjoy the weather around me. But I don't have the full picture. And because I don't have the full picture, I don't see that this is about to happen. A huge wave. Now, you and I probably know this lighthouse has been built to withstand a wave just like this, no doubt. But this really illustrates an important cybersecurity concept. I have worked with many businesses, small and large, that have gone through a cyber breach. And one of the common things that they will tell me is they'll say, Wes, I had no idea this was about to happen. I had no idea. I wish I could have seen this. I wish I could have been aware. We'd have done things differently. I had no idea. I was blindsided by it, just like this wave and us not seeing that it was actually coming. And this is really true. This paints for us that we have a gap today. We have a lack of visibility into the threats that surround us. And because we have that lack of visibility, we oftentimes can't respond in the way that we need to respond. And so I want to illustrate this for you right here. One thing that we've seen differently, especially with ransomware, if you're a small or mid-sized business, one of the top 3 threats that you face today is just financial attacks leveraging ransomware. And you know what ransomware is. We've seen this in the news. But what we've seen in the past 3 years is cyber threat actors or criminals have really changed their tactics. Instead of threats being, one person creating ransomware and then running it as much as they can, they've changed their tactics into you have malware authors that actually develop and create the ransomware, and then they distribute that down to affiliates. And those affiliates are responsible for doing the dirty work, for doing the exploitation, for doing the actual ransomware campaigns and running it en masse. And what happens is there's a revenue flow that goes from the bad guys who are the affiliates that run the ransomware. When those ransoms are paid, it goes to the developers, and the developers give those affiliates a cut. Now, in this image right here, you just see a few affiliates, but it's actually many. Many of these actors have quite a few affiliates. And so instead of it kind of looking like this in the image, it's actually a much broader, wider image that you see. And what that's caused is a prolific increase in the number of threats, especially ransomware, that we've seen than we've ever seen before. In other words, we're seeing ransomware now go after small and mid-sized business. I think it was fair in years past for you as a small business to say, I'm not a threat. I'm not big enough for anyone to be concerned about me. But today, that is not the case. Today's modern day of cyber threats is totally different in that because of this new structure of ransomware as a service, bad guys are going after big orgs and small orgs alike. You are a target. You are a target because bad guys now have the bandwidth to go after you and many others just like you. Whereas in the past, that may not have been the case. And so let's stick a number on this because I think it's important to have some kind of idea of what the damages look like. Any smart business owner needs to understand what's the risk and what am I trying to mitigate here? And there's a lot of data that we could use outside of other sources, but here's just one for you. 141,000 is what small and mid-sized businesses on average pay for a ransomware. I've seen it higher, I've seen it lower, but that's just in the financial payment alone. In other words, this is not counting things like business downtime, which could be multiple days. It's not counting things like legal costs, reputational damages, fees and fines, and all of these other things that could happen. In fact, it's much more expensive than just 141,000. But that gives you a ballpark. That gives you the idea of understanding this is the threat that I'm focusing on, and this is what I need to deal with. And so, what's led us to this epidemic? What's caused all of this? I think that's a fair question to ask. And, one of the things I really want to focus on today is we have an over-reliance on prevention. Now, prevention is really important. This is things like spam controls, antivirus, anti-malware, firewalls, things like that we put in place to stop threats. Now, those are really important. You need to have those things in place. You need to keep those things in place. That is basic hygiene that is really, really important. But here's the problem. We actually have an over-reliance on those tools. And let me illustrate it this way. What happens to us when those preventative tools miss a threat? That is when something bad happens. And this is the difference between prevention and detection. I want to illustrate this for you just in a very simple, easy to understand and digest concept. I like to explain it this way. Prevention is all about blocking known threats. Things that we know are bad, we should block it and move on in the day. That's great. We need to have that in place. That is super important. Detection is about picking up where prevention leaves off. Because we are just not going to stop every threat that's out there, we need to have detection tools that are focused on saying, hey, I'm going to look at what gets past those preventative tools and understand what an attack may look like so I can dive in, see it, and respond to it correctly. And I want to give you an illustration of what this looks like in today's modern day by using a home analogy. So look at this home for a minute. There's a lot of things that we put in place in our own homes to secure ourselves. First thing we do is we start with like door and window locks, and we put those things in place. Why do we put those there? Do we put a door lock in place because we think a criminal like a robber is going to come up and jiggle that door handle and be like, oh, shucks, man, Wes locked the door again. I'm foiled and go on to the next house. No, not at all. They're going to kick the door down. They're going to break the windows open. They're going to go through the chimney like Santa. They're going to do something like that to get in. Door locks don't stop bad guys. Well, why do we put them in place? We put them in place to keep the known bad things out, but we operate under the assumption that at some point a bad guy is going to get past those locks. And so what do? We put a home security system in place. And nobody gets mad at their home security system when a bad guy breaks in. That's not the point. The point is to say a bad guy has broken in, and because they've broken in, we see it, we know it, and we're going to take action now by calling police or whatever and eliminating or reducing that threat. That is what a home alarm system is all about. And if you transition this into your company, your own business, this is your current security today. You have the door locks and the window locks, things like virus controls and malware controls and spam controls and those things that I mentioned before. But what we're missing is detective controls. The things that are saying, I am watching 24/7 for the things that may get past my defenses. Things like log analysis and all these other things that I'm not going to describe today, but I think you know where we're going. We're saying, just like a home has an alarm system to be looking at those things, my network also needs that alarm system to be watching over for those things, because our preventative tools at some point are going to miss threats. It's just the reality. It's what always happens for us. And so I love this analogy because it really does explain a problem. It's not that we have a lack of data, not that preventative tools are bad, but we just have the absence of the ability to detect and respond to threats quickly. That is what's missing for us today. And if you even think about cloud for a minute, cloud is a great example of this. Think about this. Just like if you've adopted things like Office 365 and other things, where are my users logging in from? That's a great question. Who has access to what kinds of information? OneDrive links being shared out anonymously. Uh-oh, that's not good. New email forwards being set up and maybe emails being leaked out to a bad guy. These are just some examples of things that detective controls are built to see, are built to respond to, and just in the cloud alone. Imagine things like this, just being able to see where my logins are coming from. Man, I had somebody log in from Uzbekistan. That's not normal. That's probably something we should dive in and take a look at. That's what detective controls are all about, giving us the ability to see things that we already have access to and be able to respond. That is truly what Perch and your managed IT provider are really all about providing, is investing in detective controls as an augmentation because cyber threats have changed. I'd love to know what you think about this. Hopefully this video is helpful to you and giving you some new perspectives to think about. And I know that your managed IT provider would love to have a conversation more with you about all of this. Thanks.